Think twice. Just another day with you and me in paradise. Hey, Internet, he is risen. It is the time for me to once again be completely unprepared, except for in every other way, and say, welcome to the Saturday morning. Chill. up? Hey, Internet, he is risen. That makes you paid for, and that makes you immortal now, and he is not going to be long anyway in his return to make good on his promises in that water that sealed it. What the food feeds, your faith that Christianity is the religion to outlast, yes, even the very end of this world. Lots of your questions, Bible's answers, and my nonsense coming your way here on the Mad Christian Saturday Morning Chill. I am the Mad Christian, your personal missionary to Antifa. So Cafe Sola mentioned Max Headroom in the chat comment sideline space during the opening scene, and it was in response to, I think, how I behaved earlier, and in fact, I was, once I stumbled over my own words, trying to save myself, trying to affect Max Headroom. Now, what I wouldn't mind talking about this morning in the chat, and then if you can like highlight it by saying like Max, all caps Max on the front of it, tell me about Max Headroom. I don't even know about Max Headroom. Given that, I mean, for some of you who are back in the Wii TV days, you're going to be like, how does he not know this? But no, really, I have no idea. I know it was a TV show, like MTV, maybe, right? But this would be before I had cable in my bedroom. And so I have no idea. He moved his head around, and then I kind of just copied a little of him once in this epic trailer of awesomeness thing that's still out there. You can find it, and then so my stylization somehow at times mimicked him accidentally. The fun story of all that, if you've never heard that from Wii TV days, all that editing and mistaking kind of sound stuff initially was just the recording software I was using, or the cam I was using that was just so weak and old and ancient that it wasn't recording my voice in line with the image, right? And then I'm editing it, right, and cutting it, and then so that the processor speed of the video compilation could not bring it all together, and it created all this really weird stuff that I began to affect intentionally in the show. Anyway, Max Headroom, right? Why is that interesting? Who is he? I know he's like broadcasting to a dystopic universe or something. So, hey, look, all right. So for your fun today, right? Have that chat in the sidebar as you go. Who's Max Headroom, and why does Pastor Fisk remind us of him? Good and ill. Yeah, debate the point. So here's some notes from my conversation, if I recall. Yeah, with Dr. Kuntz. Yeah, indeed. In the most recent Brief History of Power, you can always find that by going to iTunes and looking for A Brief History of Power with Two White Guys. Yeah, it's still there. They haven't banned us yet just for being white. They may do it eventually, but we haven't been. And what are we doing? We are really intellectual, civil people who happen to be Christians having a discourse about how we got here, the plight of the common man in the present age over and against the elite baby-killing machine that is running our country. What do we do now? Pray. Yeah, okay, but so can I do something in my neighborhood? Yeah, that show, right, that will give you the intellectual wherewithal to stand against the zeitgeist of the zombie apocalypse that is going on right now in your televised reality. That's right. A Brief History of Power, Two White Guys might help you pull your head out of the sand. And my notes from that this week, he says, the time for being normal is over. Dr. Kuhn said that to me. The time for being normal is over. And that's got to be a breath of fresh air in my little heart, right? But because I've been trying to be normal for my entire life, and I finally have realized, and some of you are along with me for this ride, there's no normal in this present reality. The resurrection is awesome because that's when normal comes, right? But it resonated with me in a completely different way as well than that. And that was a comment, and I can't remember where I got this, years and years ago. Might have been White Horse Inn, I think, might have been. But it was like, Christians are weird, like as in different from the American culture circa 1998, okay? Christians are different from the American culture in all the wrong ways. That you could look at Christian culture, Christian microculture, and say, they're weird. But it wasn't because you're also actually biblical all the time or nothing like that. It wasn't because you're also very loving either. You're just selfishly weird with a Christian veneer. And that's how the world kind of could see us. So Christians are weird in all the wrong ways. And yet the real point back then especially is like, we should be weird. Christians should totally stick out. We should totally be like, no, but they're like, who are those people? What are they doing? They should be saying that about us because of our lack of fear and our love for each other, founded on the reality we believe in a kingdom that has already come and is established and yet is still coming for the sake of those that it calls to its banqueting table, amongst whom we remain here as ambassadors, each and every one at some level a confessor, a martyr, a Oh, what a religion. The time for being normal is over. When did the time for being normal begin? This will be my debate with modernism. Modernism, let us categorize it all into our own understanding, and it will be forever the truth we have spoken, and we've just projected our own psychotic reality from weird back hills, oh, goodness. Himalayas, not Himalayas. Wrong one. I'm looking for the mountain range. Alps. There you go. Backwoods Alps, Freudian. Backwoods Alps, psychotic little elite culture. Let's project that on all mankind and make human policy based on that forever. Again, brief history of power, two white guys. You should listen to where I'm getting this stuff from. Dr. Kuntz makes it make a lot more sense. But you look at what's been done to our society by the history of ideas and these lies of like everything's like this in one way because we have studied it and 12 inches makes this. Therefore, electrons, and listen to us, don't ask questions. When did science become the enemy of knowledge, right? Well, the modern idea, I think, is part of this. The modern idea is that there's something new in science, which is that we don't pay attention to the things we can't study. We think that you can't study it, it's invisible, we can't see it, and so therefore it must not have any impact. And quantum physics is just like, they're still banging their head against, they can't, we'll play with string theory instead forever. You know what I mean? They can't deal with it. Anyway, I got off on physics. I don't want to talk about physics. I want to talk about how the time for being normal is over as Christians. And that means wherever you are with your congregation right now, wherever you are in your congregation right now, it's time to stop being bothered that people look at you weird for doing the stuff that you're convinced the Bible says you're supposed to do. And like, they're like, oh, that person's weird. Like, stop feeling like you're at high school and you don't fit in when they say that, right? Like, that's just not the world you live in anymore. You have been adopted into a kingdom now, and though that kingdom cannot be seen by them who would scoff at it, in fact, when they scoff at it, they prove it to themselves on Judgment Day, actually, right? When their words come back to haunt them. Terrifying thought that. And it is the mark of your bearing the suffering of Christ to endure the world's scorn of his loving eternal self. And so it is you being unified with Christ in real present time when they mock you, and you are to them a song. But that's just it then. Your emotions have been trained by American status culture to like cower before this. And I would say to you that the telos vision, the blue light reality most of us are living in makes us will weak, spirit weak to resist it. But we can begin communally to resist it by saying we're not going to be normal together. So when you're a congregation now, like every conversation you have for the rest of the next 25 years at least, okay, about how should we change the congregation? Should we make it easier for visitors? The answer is no. The answer is time to have the visitor be like, what's going on here? This place doesn't make sense. I thought I was shopping. And then you walk up and you're like, yes, at this place, we change your life. But like there's candles and incense or whatever. It doesn't matter. What matters is that what you believe you really are, be that thing, Christian, from the Bible together. And don't let anybody's scoffing or threats to like not be part of the club anymore get in the way of your heart. I'm not saying that means you fight for it that moment in a conversation on the deck, right? I'm saying your heart is time to tell your heart it's good to be not normal. It's good that these who do not know what Scripture say see my life as what Scripture says and say, that's weird. And you go, all right. Maybe. In a good way. Yeah? So yes. Time for being normal is over. How does this apply where you are? I mean, for the LCMS, for pity's sakes, it's not about keeping the organ per se, but like we got to stop trying to hide our heritage of liturgy. Like you can't go out and start a Lutheran church and have no liturgy and be like, it's a Lutheran church. No. It's a radical Reformation church, which they came out of Lutheranism all the time. They still do. Why would they not now? But like to pretend that you're still going to be in bonded brotherhood with those who really want to hold to some sort of Lutheran Reformation ethos, it's just not going to happen. You're just going to split and divulge. Well, okay. So for my part, if we're Lutheran now, it's like whatever thing you like most about worship, it's time to not care so much about that as to whether it was there before we were born? And then do we all know that it's an orthodox thing? That is it actually good? Right? So we have this historical foundation that we can all agree upon. If we're not going to do that, we're just praying by ourselves in corners, right? Which there's something to be said for that. And yet at the same time, you don't want to try to divide the church on purpose. So the time for being normal is over. That means not looking like the culture anymore in our worship. We just got to not look like the culture anymore in our worship. And that's what the movement's been for the last 25. To reach the people, because they're so dumb apparently, you must have the information as the culture would have it and line it up just like the culture, because you're all way too dumb to listen or hear anything unless we like cheat or something. And this is Finney, and I don't need to debunk Finney right now, but like the counsel was get as normal, get as worldly as you can. When I say it that way, I say it on purpose. I'm going to say it that way more in my own heart. Get as worldly as you can for Jesus' sake. When you hear it like that, it really says it. Oh, whoa, look what we've been doing. And thank you, 2020, for the wake up. I think it applies across the board to all of us in the fights we were having. So now the time for being normal is over. The time for believing we got to change how we worship so the world be happy with us is over, right? The time to embrace the history of your congregation's worship, whatever it is, where it is right now, that begins. And the time of understanding that something should tie you to the Christianity that came before that congregation was founded, that hunt should also begin. Now, for many of you, that may be what you're already doing, which is awesome. For many of you, that may not be, which means you have a lot to learn, which is always a great opportunity. Cultishness. These are more notes from the so just under time for being normal is over. Cultishness is of value. I mean, think about it. Just think about it. Not joining cults. No. Just cultishness, like the divine cult of word and sacrament. Yeah. It's biblical talk. Do not mobilize perfection. Ooh. The monster is eating the new institutions. Be optimistic about people's capacity for change. That's Preface Your Power 2 White Guys. You can go check that out on Podbean, on iTunes, or wherever else. Let's see. What else did we talk about? This week, the idea of going into the matrix is even more substantial. I don't like using this analogy because it requires a outside or extra biblical idea and story to help you navigate the framework of your reality. And yet I haven't found the biblical parallel to the Matrix yet. So if you find this story, I mean, it is there. It's kind of there in like Moses. But if you find this story in the Bible in the way I'm about to say it, let me know about it. I'd like to hear your view, how I could teach this without referencing the Matrix and just doing it from a purely biblical theology. But at this point in my life, thinking about my time engaging visual electronics, right? I'm going to distinguish it from like light bulbs, right? But visual electronics, I view it as going into the Matrix. And by that I mean that I go into a world that appears normal in every way. However, at any time, there's a great evil that might just take over my brain. And I never know when that may or may not get to the point where I never come back to being me again. And I think that's a really helpful way to look at the internet. I mean, maybe I should just say the internet. It's a really helpful way to look at the internet. You're going into the place where you just never know where someone might eat your brain, and you never come back. And you don't know why. In fact, you thought it was a good idea when it happened. You're like, eat my brain, please. Because that's how demons work. Seriously, that is how they work. And so to invite into your heart, through your eyeballs, a constant stream of energetic spirit that is from far away that you cannot really control at the end of the day. You cannot control the inputs on the machine. It decides when it's going to tell you what's going to tell you. And especially if you're using their stuff more and more, they're going to sell within the cell. And who knows what they got behind the screen glimmering that you've never seen. I was just talking. This morning, I asked that question to my mom. I was like 8 years old. Like, how do we know? Mama, how do we know these screens don't have like a second level where they telling us that we're different than we think we are, and then we become not who we want to be? And she said, "Oh, don't worry about that, baby. We're all fine. We're all fine. They take care of us." I said, "Oh yeah, okay. They take care of us. That's right. We live in a good world." See, now that's the thing I'm like not with, right? Anymore. I don't know what scientifically is behind your screen. I have no clue. But what I do know is that if you look at the advent of internet streaming, and then if you look at the advent of televised streaming, and you look at like the actual trajectory of Western culture's like virtue systems, you have the opposite happening on every single level. And so if you want to be a virtuous human who clings to what you believe is true, every time you enter the Matrix, every time you go in, it's like dousing yourself with a certain kind of blindness drug, accepted, it was sort of like a shared proposed reality that you must accept to engage in it. And while you're there, you never know what argument you might assent to without realizing it, because the commercials, certainly, if they don't have stuff behind the scenes, just the moving images and colors with the picture and words all at once. I mean, it is a brainwashing device. It is a brainwashing device. That is what it is. I mean, have you seen one? Do you notice how you can't stop? Yes. See, there is something going on. Just think about that. We're still on max headroom there, but going into the Matrix, to think about it that way, because you can't just turn it off either, right? Like, what are you going to do? Stop working? Cut off the income? Go live in a cave? No one could do. This is not wise. This would be foolish, right? So the antidote is not full knee-jerk black-white, pull the plug and run on whatever ship it was through the weird post-Matrix world stuff. The answer is to engage life in the Matrix, just knowing where you are. Right? Just know where you are. This is Egypt land, right? This is the Philistine territory, and they got magics. They got magics the ancient world, maybe before the flood, but post-flood, did not know about, could not conceive of. Brainwashing devices, right? So go into it with all caution. And why am I saying this? Well, is it law? Look at Fisk, he's preaching law. Like, well, no. I think what I'm preaching is fellowship, actually. What I'm preaching is that Christians desire, we do all desire a similar state of being. We desire a concordia in our congregating around the Bible, and that when those who have voices that are not in that concordia are allowed to run rampant in our midst, the concordia dissolves. It goes away. And all that takes for a family of four is to put a TV in the room, maybe three, and just like that, you only got one major voice in the house, and it ain't the father, and it ain't the mother. Oh no, it's the big brother, sis, whatever, 1984, and it was the year. It was the year, was it not? What a time. Hey, so we got your questions coming this way this morning, and in about 10 minutes here, we're also going to be meeting a wild turnip or something. I don't know anything about turnips. I don't know why people would find turnips interesting except for this. I'm hooked on this. I remember one of those times in the drugland dystopia of Nintendo. When I was 8, right? And it's like I could just be there for hours because it's so good. And it's like freeing from the abyss of pain I apparently live in. But, sinful condition and all, that's my experience. In any case, I remember in this game, Super Mario Brothers 2, which I was pretty happy I beat in 3 days. I was like, yes. But whatever, it was pretty easy too, if I recall, especially if you use the princess. So anyway, within this game, there's these things you pull out of the ground to throw at the bad guys sometimes. The bad guys are like little moving mushrooms and things. It's a strange universe, this whatever whatever throwback, like punchback, secret little attack on America Nintendo is. They got some crazy in there for sure. So you're throwing these things at these little moving mushrooms and turtles and stuff. It sounds so weird as you talk about it. But every once in a while you'd pull up a turnip. You would pull up a turnip. I swear that's what it was. Maybe it wasn't. Someone correct me. But yeah, little turnips too, big turnips. Or are those just radishes? I don't know. And you throw those. They're kind of useless. The turnips are useless. They didn't make you big. They didn't give you fireballs or put like a Pookie suit on you or nothing. And so Pookie suits. That's like 3. That's 3. Anyway, it all becomes a blur, and it's okay when it was 30 years ago to not remember it in direct line. But Mario made an impact. Okay, I shifted on to Mario. Goodness gracious, from your questions. Oh, I don't even know. But we're going to come back. Oh, it's a turnip. That's why I'm selling the turnip to you. I shifted on Mario because of the turnip. Later this show, we have a turnip to sell you. And I, again, know very little about turnips except what I just shared about Super Mario, which was probably confusing to most of you, but kind of fun for the other like 3%, right? And but we have something new and turnip-like coming in 9 minutes here. But until then, I'm going to take my little 1-minute setup here, come back with one of your questions, so hang tight. Turnips, you say? What's this? Wait, hold on. I wasn't fast enough. Can I do it like this? There you go. Turnips, you say? What's this? What? Turnips, you say? I did. I said turnips. Something about turnips. It's coming. Something. Sidewinder starts us off this morning with this one. Are the Ten Commandments relative to culture? Have you read Echo? Do you know a book called Echo? I don't sell these books enough. I should sell them more. I have this problem of personal shame, so I'm not proud of anything I ever did. But Echo's really pretty good. And the Ten Commandments are pretty relevant. The Lord's Prayer, fairly relevant. And I would say the Creed also, incredibly relevant. The most relevant things in Christianity, maybe aside from the statement that the Pope is the Antichrist, are the Ten Commandments, the Creed, and the Lord's Prayer, or the historic the Catechism. The Catecheo. So are the Ten Commandments relative to culture? Yes, okay, so now we're going to go on, though. We're going to get detailed on it, yeah. I am ringside clapping and cheering with the way you expound on the Decalogue, particularly the highest ideals you hold for purity and chastity. I'm curious what I said specifically that pulled that out. Yeah, because I usually don't think of myself as like a purity advocate. My experience with purity as a word in evangelicalism is always like they're trying to do a good thing, but they're probably legalists. Like that's sort of usually what happens. But so I'm glad you're hearing that though, because I believe very firmly in the deliverance of purity in the atoning sacrifice of Jesus. Right, holiness is very closely connected to this. And then what a pure life looks like then is one that shuns evil. Right, it seeks to be away from evil. So yeah, if you hear me encouraging us away from evil, including in the sexual realm, but Paul makes a statement in Corinthians that makes it clear that sexual sin is a sin against your own body, and in that way is particularly bad for you to do, right? But I think we overemphasize that there's like the other 9, and they're just as bad and worse even, like the third commandment, not sanctifying the holy day, whatever that means. You go ahead and decide what it means. If you just don't do it, that's bad. We all freak out about, again, 6th. Well, yeah, actually they're quite the same in one sense, adultery and blasphemy. That'd be the second commandment a little bit, but adultery and false worship, they're quite closely connected. Anyway. So yeah, hopefully you hear me speaking about the whole Decalogue, and then in that, certainly, I'm an advocate of marriage as being delivered by God, naturally observable in the world around you, and generally monogamous as designed. It can happen non-monogamously, and usually, whatever you want to say, shame's involved. And I'm just believing more and more. If shame's involved, I don't even need to use the word sin. Sin's just what we call things that make shame. It's the old word for the stuff that makes you feel bad. Sin. No. Feel bad meaning shame, right? Now, for those of you who are suddenly like, but I shame myself, therefore, no, stop. That's where you're carrying original shame. That's okay. You have that. Some of us have a greater deal of that we're aware of than others. But the original shame, yeah, you repent of that. And then if you got the critic going, shut the critic up. Just shut the critic up. You're baptized. Move on. 10 Commandments. Let's walk with purity, understanding it flows from Jesus first. And the promise is that goodness and mercy are going to follow you and hound you and eventually exude from you all the days of your life, whether that's finally at the resurrection or you get like foretaste of the feast to come. Well, you get both of those things, right? So that walk comes from loving these words and believing these words are deep and true, and believing the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments, are deep and true is absolutely the most Lutheran thing you can do. The guy said the first commandment teaches you everything you ever need to know. You don't need anything else. Like, that's what he said. Now, I think he was hyperbolizing because he was wont to, right? But he was also kind of right once you figure it out. Like, you can go backwards in, you're like, oh, yep, it's all right there. So, 10 Commandments, highest ideals indeed. However, you say, I've come up against some practices that blur these lines in my mind. For example, I have heard that nudity is widely accepted in parts of Europe. In another culture I observe closely, the man only has to beckon with his finger and the girl has to go with him. They have no say. This was at a Christian college. That's just terrifying right there. I want to back up to nudity. I don't know. I don't know much about nudity. I shower. Right. So to answer, though, I want to give you some theology that nudity is the ideal state of humanity in the garden. Like, unquestionably, we were designed to be nude. And yet, unquestionably, being nude shames us. And this isn't just like we're wrong. It's like actually true now. Right. So that we're supposed to cover ourselves. And ultimately, that cover is the blood and body of Jesus Christ, a new body rising from the dead or snapped into when he returns. Right. So make sure we don't put nudity in the evil category because it's just not, right? It's just not. However, we are, and so therefore we kind of make it bad by having it. Now, does that mean in parts of Europe where I think, as you referenced that, a family might all use the same bathroom and there's a sauna and they just go in the sauna nude because that's how you keep it? Look, that's just culture. Like, if there's no hanky-panky going on, no evil going on, there's not a problem there. In fact, it might be really, really healthy for the boys and girls to not be so like overwhelmingly sensationalized about the whole thing like we do. Like, oh, you can't see it, and then it's on TV all the time, right? Like what? Right? So I'm not going to like condemn that. However, with the extreme here where you're talking about where, they have this kind of male dominant, where you take anyone you want. I mean, oh, golly, God help us is what I got on that one. I want to finish your comment here. Similarly, with regard to coveting, if I have something when it's not ours, it's ours, not mine. What would we consider stealing would be seen as selfishness. It just seems that there are variations in understanding the commands. If you have any thoughts, that's good. If not, that's cool too. It's just something I've been wondering about. Thanks again for your faithful teaching. You know what? I'm going to come back and finish that one because I think the end of it deserves a little more time. And we got a Turnip Magnate that should be showing up sooner than later here. So I'm going to go ahead and invite him if he's watching to give me the ring. Or I can try to go over here and talk and do it at the same time. Oh, how do I do it? Like this. I'm calling you. Oh, it's loud. Makes my head hurt. You guys can't hear that. Thankfully, dun, 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 dun. Dun, dun, dun. I don't know. Maybe he's not ready for me. No answer. Oh, is he there?
Yes, I am. Hello.
He's there. Hello. Can I get you this way? Uh-oh. No. Are you sending any picture?
I don't know. I haven't used Skype in a good decade.
So you're not, which is okay. That'll all be good. Yeah, good decade. Well, why not? Let's just start there. Why would you not use Skype? Are you crazy? I completely hate Skype with a passion. So bash Skype, please.
My friends and I used to use it back before Discord or TeamSpeak, or we found TeamSpeak. We didn't find it until later. We used to use Skype to play things like Minecraft or something like that, so we didn't have to sit on 2-hour-long calls. And we just found what we thought to be better platforms to do that with.
Platforms. Now, you seem to have in your following, I don't know much about you, honestly, at all. I know that I'm supposed to talk to you because you're awesome. And so I'm doing it, right? Like, okay, let's talk. But like platforms and forward thinking and history and the world, like you're the turnip merchant. Just introduce yourself for a moment to everybody who's here. And it's like, who's that guy?
Oh, well, that's, I don't know how awesome I really am. I don't know about that label. I go by a few names: Turnip Merchant, Turnip Magnate. Usually if you see something on Discord or YouTube and it has turnip in it and it has an avatar similar to this one, it's probably me. I usually go on Academic Agent has a YouTube channel. We usually talk about things like history or metapolitics, economics, things along those lines. I just recently was on a stream, not this last Friday, but the week before that, where I was arguing against the patriotic or nationalist worldview from a sort of Christian perspective, mostly just because I'm tired of people calling themselves nationalists, saying that they're Christians, and then kind of just sidelining the whole Christianity part of that and just taking the label. But that's besides the point. People like to have me on because apparently I know history, which, I mean, that's great, but then I also have people that say that I'm really good, and I don't know how true that is.
Well, okay, so I can help you with that a little bit because I have shame issues myself where I can't accept the quality of my own work, and at a certain point, it's really not helpful to everyone else when you do good work and you can't see it. It's helpful if you can see it and be like, oh, it is good. Here, I'll share it more. So I'm gonna say that the preponderance of people who like you enough to compel me to hear about you when my head's in the sand and then get you on my show says you got something to offer. And apparently, right, it's a historical insight that is incredibly unique because you're very well read when it comes to history. But then you also are, how old?
17.
Oh, you're just a kid. Why am I even talking to you? Kids don't know nothing. Oh, the millennials are all a bunch of twerps. So, but like this is just it. The generation that went before mine actually thinks that still. I don't think that at all. I think intelligence, understanding, it can be given to the young, it can be given to the old, and usually it comes through wisdom of Scripture for sure, like Solomon and stuff. So I'm intrigued, as I think many people are, by you having an understanding at such a young age. So I'm going to just go weird on you and say, when did you start reading history? Like, how old do you remember having like an encyclopedia or something, and you're just studying that thing with a passion?
I I've always heard about people that would read encyclopedias and things like that, and I never got that. Like they're just really dry to me. The first time I remember having like a interest in history was, I think I was in the 5th grade, and we had these textbooks and all that with, I think it was history of the United States or something like that, because we alternated subject year by year. And like the first half of it was colonialism, and I just found the subject fascinating because you had all these new lands that were relatively unsettled, and you had all these different kingdoms coming around, and you had all these different issues, religious issues, things like that. And of course, I got the Lutheran perspective because I went to a Lutheran school for the first 8 grades of my life. So it also helped that I had a teacher there who like actually would help with that, which I'm not sure I would have gotten in the public school system. So 5th grade kind of got that, and that kind of just grew. My 8th grade was the 2016 election, so I had opinions and I needed to support them, so I would go read to back them up, which is backwards. I understand.
That's very novel.
But,
it's very novel. Actually, it's not novel at all in the sense that it wouldn't be reading a novel, right? But it's a very novel approach. Very, very clever.
Huh. And then after that, I had the AP system in the school. You know, get college credits if you take a course in high school. Yeah. I had a teacher for AP United States history who kind of just looked at the curriculum that they gave him and said, you know what, I'm going to teach this class in the most thorough possible way I can, and this isn't good enough. Huh. He was a really old guy, which obviously you don't get people like that teach like that anymore.
Rarely.
He would basically just say, all right, you have, for example, say we're talking about like the Populist Party in the 1880s. He'd be like, so the book wants you to read about the summary. I'm going to have you go read their platform that you can find at this place. So I got a lot of primary reading for a lot of these things, which is why if people like ask me like, what's a good book to go read about this subject? I'm just like, have you tried reading the primary source? Like that's usually all you need. And if you're like writing a doctoral thesis or something like that, then you might go for, I don't know, the extended analyses.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so there's a guy who calls himself Cringewalker out there on the internet, and he has thrown pesos at your feet. My feet. He's thrown me 2 pesos in order to get you to talk about Malthusian delusions. For the sake of the listeners who may indeed be like 6-year-old kids watching cartoons. Hi, kids. Welcome to America. Malthusian is a term from a guy, you can correct me on his full name, but it refers to a theory that overpopulation is coming and already here, and we're going to run out of food. And if I'm not mistaken, this is hundreds of years old, and he was really wrong. There's a population narrative that comes out in the 70s and 80s or 60s, and you'll correct me with this guy's name too, right? But this idea has become common policy that more kids are dangerous, basically.
Correct.
That's the idea. So now you talk about that because you'll give it the real framework.
So I did a stream on this with a guy called Radical Liberation. That's his name. I think he would describe himself as some variant of like Christian anarchist or something like that. But we were talking about Malthus there. What you have is a guy called Malthus in the 1700s. He theorized that population would grow exponentially, but food output would grow linearly. Mm-hmm. So if you have like the Cartesian coordinate plane, food output's growing in a straight line going up, and population's growing in like a curve that just rockets sky high almost immediately. Obviously wrong, because what Malthus didn't predict was that you would have innovations that would increase food output. Like, for instance, at that time, the majority of the North American continent was basically unsettleable because the soil in the middle, you couldn't just plow over it with the tools they had available to them. You didn't have things like steel plows or things like that. So the Great Plains at that time was just kind of seen as a wasteland, completely unsettleable, would never produce food ever. Obviously, not true. Now it's the breadbasket of a good chunk of the world's population. And you also have, refrigeration that would help with food preservation at the very least. And population in some parts of the world is growing exponentially, but in other parts of the world is not. So he's also wrong on that front as well. But that does not stop people that are in power, or the elites, whatever you want to call them, from taking his theories as fact. You have the Club of Rome, as they were called in the past few decades, and still going around today, basically applying the Malthusian economic or food theories to climate change. And they're basically saying, all right, Malthus was wrong in that he didn't predict these innovations, but now we've got another big scary man coming around the corner, and it's climate change, and it's going to wreck everything. And they basically, what they do is they have a bunch of calculations and equations, things like that, where if they don't get what they want, they just change the variable to produce the graph that they want. So they have this book that they released. The name escapes me right now. One of the Club of Rome treatises on climate change, where they basically have a ton of graphs, and they're basically like, look over here. By the time we get to 2030, the carbon in the atmosphere is going to like quintuple or something like that. All the farmland's going to die, and your population's going to completely decline because food production will have gone away because of climate change. Totally not Malthusian. And basically what they do to remedy this is they say, all right, so you need to give your population, ye world leaders who are listening, you need to make sure they're using birth control, that they aren't putting out carbon emissions, that they're cutting down on food usage, and they will accept a lower quality of life. It's the same theory, kind of updated for the modern world with something that can't necessarily even be disproven.
Right.
So not really scientific.
The unseen is one of my favorite categories these days, from virology to physics to indeed climate change. We seem to put a lot of faith in stories about things we can't see and actually test very sufficiently. I find that just amazing, the religion that so much of this really is. And so, okay, so then kind of leaving the content aside for a second and back to your story. So you're discovering you like history. You're discovering you like a framework of non-modernism as we know it, that is a world in which kings and colonies and sort of almost a fantasy framework, right? But not real history. And you're like, oh, the world really was like this, and I can see how it maybe still applies, right? So when did that connect, that maybe the kings hadn't gone away, if I can ask it that way?
Well, as you study more history, you see that a lot of the people change, and a lot of the mechanisms of power change, but you still kind of have the same, I don't know what you would call it really, the same sort of man-serving orders coming down from on high, no matter who's really in power. And there have been a lot of, that's not to say that nothing changes. There have been a lot of power mechanisms that have really radically changed, and you can debate which ones are better or worse. Personally, I think that we're in one of the worst ones right now, but that's for a different topic for a different time. When you see things like when you read about things like the Glorious Revolution or something like that, where Parliament supplants the king as the most high force in the land, and you see things like the dominions being created in the 13 colonies that sort of supplant what was previously just self-organized governments, you kind of see that you can trace who are the kings now back to then, usually, unless you get something insane happening like a Bolshevik revolution or something like that.
Right, dynasty change.
Yep. But for the most part, it's the same people, and oftentimes they use the same strategies or the same tactics.
So talk about that then. I mean, and talk about that particularly as like what, you're 12 and you're like, oh, look at this. Or is it 15, 17, 16? Now, what does that feel like when you're really living in the world for the first time? For me, I lived through a whole, like, again, Matrix level delusion up until this last year. And now it's like, oh, look, kings. So, what's it like just having this be the only world you live in? You must look at those of us in the Matrix, in the zombie world, and be like, look at all the zombies. I mean, talk about that. We need to hear that.
I didn't always have the understanding I had. When I was a freshman in high school, some 3 years ago, I really bought into kind of the Whig history version of history that the schools will teach you, which is that history progresses towards this one specific end, more freedom, more progress, whatever have you. Because I didn't necessarily have, at the time, like the primary sources to go against that, which, like, if you read them for a good 5 minutes or something like that, very obvious that that's not how history progresses. So, I mean, I was also in that sort of matrix delusion. It's just, I don't know, I guess I just slowly got out of it. I don't think there was some sort of a major event that caused me to break out. It just sort of happened. And then when 2020 rolled around and we got riots in May, I was kind of like, all right, well, that just confirms it. Like,
right. So you saw, for me, a lot of that was the opening of the onion. And then for you, that was kind of the kernel. You're like, oh, there it is. It's confirmed. You know, your suspicions are real. Unfortunately, I'm still trying to confirm a lot of my suspicions, but that's, again, the depth of the lie, I think, especially when you've attuned your heart to it, certain expectations. What do you see as a solution? I mean, you're out here talking, so you're not so afraid that they're going to knock on your door exactly. Then again, you're a little incognito too. Well, you know, they can track your cell phone or something, maybe.
Right.
Why would they? Do you care? I mean, what's your theory on that? What is your trajectory right now?
So wait, hold on. Solution for the state that we're in right
That's
now?
right.
Or?
Just general man's answer. Like right now, what's the problem? What's the solution? Historically, where are we? How safe are we? How in danger are we? Yeah.
Right. Well, what we have going on right now is historically unprecedented. You've never had we're essentially a democracy. You have people that say, look, we're a republic, we have representatives, but they're elected directly. It's a facade. You haven't seen a democracy really get this far without just collapsing in on itself, which is, that's one of the original Greek problems with democracy. It eats itself out from the inside once you let it just grow long enough. So if you are in the United States, you're in the midst of the collapse of an empire. When people write history books about this era in the future, they're going to look back at this time right now and basically just say, so obviously the United States empire is collapsing. You've had riots for the past 50 or so years. You've had the people internally divided. No one finds anything in common with each other. The currency is overinflated. It has no value. No one trusts it. You have a lot of people that are in debt, so much so that you can equivocate it to the sort of Roman system of slavery, where you had an exorbitant amount of the population essentially in slavery.
Yeah.
You have that kind of here too. Well, what's your college student in debt that's bought into the whole worldview from the time that they've grown up into the public school to now? How are they going to go against anything? They are essentially just slaves in that regard. You're in the collapse of an empire historically, unless from a miracle from heaven, it gets reversed. I don't think it's likely. It could happen, However, oh wait, what were you going to say?
Keep going.
Well, I was going to say, however, collapse of an empire, what can you do? Well, you're not going to be able to stop it usually. You yourself, man that you are, hard to stop 320 million other people going the way that they're going. And what you've also seen is that not only the empire is collapsing, but also the institutions inside of it. So you have a lot of, for instance, back at the foundation of the state that you're in right now, churches were a very large pillar of the community. They sort of arbitrated what was moral and what was not. You don't have that anymore. They kind of just go along with everything, the majority of them, which is part of, not the only reason, mind you, why I converted to the LCMS from what I was. They usually just go along. Like, you have the Episcopals, the Methodists, the Catholics in a large degree, and even some Lutherans in the North that call themselves Lutheran. Whether they are or not, though,
That's always an internal debate amongst Lutherans. I mean, there's a point at which it's healthy, and there's a point at which it's very, very sick. So we'll just leave that one where it is. But yeah.
But you have all these people that would normally keep things normal and say, and manage in their community, this is moral, this is not moral. You should be doing this. You need to be doing this. They aren't doing that anymore. Right. They've turned into basically a facilitator, basically saying, yeah, we'll wave the rainbow flags, we'll do all of this, just go along, we won't offend you. Things along those lines, which is the exact opposite of what they're supposed to be doing. So, and there's other examples, like your own money, something as simple as that, has also been essentially subverted. You can no longer exchange it for gold. It's backed by nothing. All of these institutions have been hollowed out from the inside So what can you do? Protect what knowledge you have. Usually with the collapse of Rome or something like that, people like to point to that. I don't really like the example. I don't think we are as analogous to Rome as most people think we are. Something that is true throughout any collapse, though, is that if you have like physical knowledge, a book, transcript, anything like that, music, sheet music, things along those lines, probably a good time to start saving those.
Yes.
Because there's no guarantee that this whole internet thing will survive. Who knows what catastrophe would come in the future? And even if it does, there's no guarantee that what is on there will be what is true necessarily.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So, save your physical knowledge. Probably good to find a congregation which follows Christ, not the law, not just the gospel. Follows the whole thing. Probably
just
good to
generally, if they actually, as a group right now, as my betting game, right? As a group right now, you think the Bible's true as a group, and you're like, we've been kind of forgetting that, but we're going to remember it now. If you're in that church, you're in a good spot. If you're not in that church, you're not in a good spot. Like, if they're not rediscovering the Bible right now, they're not repenting. And there's almost none of us that don't need to repent. So there should be an awakening in the group of a hunger for Scripture, and that all of us need more of it. And if that's not happening again, again, think twice. Please continue. Your story is singing my nightmares to wickedness. Please continue.
So probably good to ingratiate yourself within that congregation as well, because very good for your spiritual well-being. I think we would all agree. But if you're talking about what should we do in the collapse of an empire, not really as metaphysical as the other side of that whole thing. So having a congregation that you can rely on when like everything is collapsing around you, that's a pretty good thing. That, like, friends are always good to have, especially when they believe the same things as you. That was another discussion that was had on the nationalism and patriotism stream. I was making the point that if you are only friends because you have a shared enemy, not really that great of friends. Usually you need something a bit more than that. So if you have a congregation where you all confess the same thing, and for the most part believe the same thing, that's a very great thing to have just at all at any time in the history of ever.
Yeah. Tribes can unite to fight a shared enemy, but a tribe cannot unite by having a shared enemy. Like, the tribe has to exist in trust first, and then you realize that for the existence of your tribe and another tribe that you might not want to help, you both can work together, but that's based upon your group trust that you already have built within the tribe. And right. I mean, you can do that individually one-on-one with friendships. You certainly can, but to get groups to move. So let me just throw one more idea in there, just from way back. You're kind of talking about how it's not Rome, it's America, it's different, it's complex, but it is an empire collapsing. It's been going on for longer than our lifetimes, so we're born into the end of this, and so don't whine too much, guys. You're not really being victimized, just sort of one of the waves, right, of history. But so you're suggesting, and I agree with you, that you cannot save the empire. I'll go one further, and I'll tell you it's Charlemagne's empire, and when the queen dies, that's the end. But that's just my guess, okay? You can't save the empire, whatever the empire really is, however you want to imagine it, America or otherwise. But you can be a duke who saves the region.
Oh, yes, of course.
Right? Since you agree, talk about that. Take that thought.
So regional influence is something great to have in the collapse of an empire, but especially now because the United States, while it's not really organized into Roman provinces where you have someone from on high sending the governor or the representative or the envoy down to manage the region, in theory, a bit more bottom up. Whether or not it is, I don't really think it is too terribly much, but more than Rome. It's up for debate. You can put yourself into a position to, I don't know, save your town or your village or your city or whatnot.
I'm starting with my neighborhood, but yeah.
Your neighborhood, whatever unit you want to do. You can basically try to build up some sort of a wall to keep out the barbarians or whatnot. Build up a tower, grain silo. Now, not literally, maybe literally, grain silos might be good if you know currency is not really backed
food
up by
supply
anything.
chain, right?
And-
Food
yeah,
supply chain and networking.
yeah. I mean,
It
if
doesn't have to be a local village in the sense of in the neighborhood to be a local village that is within car distance 30 or 40 miles. And
Yep.
if you have 50 to 150 people that are just supporting each other with their various hand-to-mouth abilities working together, then you can endure the shockwave of the false financing magics that is modern finance. And,
Yes.
and a congregation gives you a seed bed wherein you are likely to find a beginning of that network. You're not going to necessarily have the network and the congregation be the same thing, but they will be two networks that overlap, and you will easily find more of that network at the congregation because you're seeking some of the same futures. I've been amazed in my congregation with our men's group how many men, when I talk about how we're in a time where prioritizing survival in the event of network food collapse is going to happen, they don't like go, oh, really? They're like, yeah, you're right. Like everyone's like ready to talk about it, right? And it was like I thought I'd just sell them on it. And no, everyone's kind of like really aware that that's where we're brittle and that there's nothing we can do quickly. And so, like, well, then you start those conversations. And again, I found that these men who are by and large family men, like they have kids, well, that's why they're thinking about this. They're not just thinking about
Yes.
themselves. They're thinking about the future of their children and the frailty of life. And in any case, I kind of took a different direction there. One of the other things that you had talked about, though, that Dr. Kuntz has mentioned in our show, Brief History of Power, is the looting phase. That when the empire is collapsing, you said it's being hollowed out from the inside. I mean, he sees that as the elites loot while they can. They loot and they stockpile. And in one sense, your advice to grab the paper and build the library while you can, that's the same thing. You're looting. And the more that we can see that we're not in a merchant transaction society so much as a get it cheap while you can society that won't be here for 100 years, the more you might get the right things cheap while you can. And again, the looting to me helps just kind of see it that way. The slavery talk, the death slavery, all that stuff's so real. It's just so real. So we've got another 5 minutes here, and I want to give you the majority of that time to talk about whatever you want to talk about. So we're already kind of on your agenda, I think. But yeah, just preach your message, man. What up?
Well, like I said, these topics have been elaborated upon on the two other channels I mentioned, Academic Age and Radical Liberation. Both, I've spoken for hours, I think, on both of them, and for whatever reason people want to listen to it.
Academic Agent and what's the other one?
Radical Liberation.
And these are both podcasts?
They are both channels on YouTube which do podcasts, but they also have other content.
Gotcha.
The former Academic Agents, usually more politics, metapolitics, history oriented. The latter, Radical Liberation, is more economics oriented, both of which I would highly recommend. You will find a wealth of knowledge there in both of them. And the latter one might be very favorable to what you already believe, considering that there is, a shared source material between both, being biblical truth. I don't really know what to talk about.
Well, do you own Bitcoin? How's that?
No, I don't own Bitcoin.
No? Okay, so what's your answer to... Go ahead.
I think my father does, though, but that might be...
What's your answer to collapsing dollar that doesn't exist? I mean, what's your... Are you storing, like, water to trade or what?
Well, it's always good to have, basics on hand, because a collapsing empire isn't the only thing that can happen that would render you unable to eat or drink, which, you need. However, what you see with societies is that if you can't, they basically progress from bartering to like usually some sort of precious metal standard that they will exchange things into currency that is backed by those precious metals, and then just to fiat currency. If ever the fiat currency collapses, you can just go back to anywhere along the progression, and you just start again. So that's why you still have people collecting gold right now.
Correct.
It's because in the short term, probably like in the right when it collapses, probably not useful. After the collapse, though, probably useful because just throughout history, humans always trade in gold or silver, or silver's the other one. So
gold and Bitcoin. It's kind of I'm into the Bitcoin a little bit too, to hedge both futures. The where you get electricity or we don't get electricity, but I think the fear is not like, I know if I have the gold and we go to a gold because we're just trading, like that's all great and all, and I might even be like having a lot or something, maybe not, I don't know, can I get it out of my safety vault, right, and all that, but the fear is living through the short-term collapse, and that's where I think your narrative and the narrative on A Brief History of Power at least leads toward knowing that it's not necessarily a short-term collapse. We're dealing with the fall of an empire is a slow apocalypse. And
yes.
Yeah. So can you talk about that too, then, just for a few moments?
So fall of an empire, not everyone's going to live. You're going to see a lot of people that are not going to make it. Yeah. And probably a lot of the elderly that we have right now, because if this empire collapses, if,
right.
you know, pharmaceuticals don't get transported, doctors are busy elsewhere, there's going to be a tragedy for the history books right there, and for anyone else that's affected by them. You're going to have a lot of these nursing homes, things, modern inventions that you haven't had anywhere else in history, that's only facilitated by the fact that we've made it this far. If we revert, those are going to go away. And then even then, there's just a lot of, you know, elderly that aren't cared for anyways by their families, that especially won't be cared for if, you know, the end of the road is coming. So you're going to see a lot of those people not make it. And then you're going to see a lot of people, especially in the urban areas, if it does collapse in the, you know, the catastrophic way that we think it will, like normal, the urban areas aren't going to be well off either. They aren't self-sustaining. Mm-hmm. They are within a transactionary system with the rural areas, where the rural areas will produce their food and sell it to the urban areas, and the urban areas will take that food, exchange some sort of currency for them, and produce other things. Like, the urban areas don't even have, like, factories anymore.
They used to exist to have factories,
management.
right? That's what it was there for, was for the factory. Now they're like, give us money and food anyway, even though we don't do nothing but tell you what to do that you don't want to do. Sorry,
yes, exactly.
That's a little broad, but...
Well, they are bureaucratic hubs. Some of them are still transport hubs. Like, a lot of places in the Great Plains and things like that, there's a lot of transport hubs in places that are cities, so they do still have a purpose. But if the United States Empire does collapse, you might not see cities like, New York City being around very much longer, just because, yeah, it's a port, but you have coastline everywhere else along that area. It's not guaranteed to be the only port. You could see, and you saw things like that happen when a European kingdom collapsed. Like, a port would die out, and things like that.
You get further down. I think a lot of my questions about after 2 weeks have to do with how much and how fast death would be in the 2 weeks of a real evident collapse, and whether the food supply chains are there or not. If they stay there, we have a lot of people around. If they don't stay there, you got a lot of fighting, you got a lot of bloodshed, you got a lot of dead people, you got a lot less people in 3 weeks. Like, we're not going to count these people ever, kind of thing.
Right.
And how do you plan for that, right? I mean, how do you plan for that? You can't. You got to pray for it, is my answer. But
exactly.
Go ahead.
You can't pray for it, you're right. And here's something else to consider. Well, the people that do run, essentially, the food supply, the food supply chain, truckers they have political leanings, believe it or not. People in cities also have political leanings, usually not the same. What's guaranteeing that these people won't be at each other's throats if there's no longer a empire keeping them civil, quote unquote? Like, not really keeping them civil, but they aren't in all-out warfare right now. If I'm running a truck, why would I want to deliver to a city that has voted for the past 60 years to essentially destroy me? Yeah, right. So you also have that to worry about. And of course, if you're in the city and you don't vote that way, you also have that to worry about, because the people you are surrounded with, you're going to get caught in that, whether or not you like it.
Yeah, I remember a video sometime. I've really backed out of watching Twitter stuff at all, but I was deep in Twitter land all the way through the election cycle. And I remember a video of one of the Black Lives Matter protests or Antifa events. I don't remember which one. I follow Ending to Go. There's more than enough to forget what you've seen and still know what you saw. But I remember a woman who certainly was not a Trump supporter by any stretch. In fact, there may even have been a Biden signer, but sure, she makes it clear that she is a liberal, in the right-left sense of the term. And yet she has got people who are protesting on her front area against, racism and whiteness and stuff. And she happens to be a white woman. and she and them are going at odds. And I remember it getting ugly. In fact, I remember being very disturbed by this video. And so it's kind of what you're saying there is that in the city at a certain point, no one is really allied with anybody. And what's keeping them together is their ticket on the food chain. And as soon as that ticket's gone, there's a different kind of freedom that takes over that I can only call barbarianism. And what's rising in these groups within the city under ethnic labels is barbarianism. It is non-civility towards those outside the tribe. And again, what does that mean for you who would be civil? It means you need to form civil tribes. Yeah? What do you think?
Yes, and I agree there. And usually when people point to Rome and the collapse and all that, they're like, they were barbarians, they've made it into the gates and all this other stuff. Well, you have a similar situation over here. It's just there is no uncivilized land outside anymore that hasn't been built up by Rome. The barbarians are very much inside the land right now, and in some cases inside the city walls. So whenever this whole thing collapses, which it eventually will, not guaranteed to be tomorrow. I'm not here to predict the apocalypse like the Seventh-day Adventists or, people like that. Is that the right denomination? I don't even remember.
There's a number of them that do it, but you're right. Yeah.
I'm not here to do that, but I am saying when this thing does collapse, the barbarians are not outside the gates like they were in Rome. They are very much, they could be, if you're in a city, they could be like the floor below you in an apartment block.
You know what I realized? I am one. I actually am one.
Oh, yeah,
I'm just also a Christian, so I have a certain virtue about me, but I'm far more barbaric than the plebeian slave that is duty bound to his debts within the system. I mean, I have rejected that outright, and I don't flaunt that at them, but in my own heart, I do. I look down on it. I think that's a horrible way to live, and so that there's a certain refreshingness to this that I don't think is all wrong, because the civility we've been trained in has had its own nearsightedness, right? Particularly with regard to masculinity and such healthy emotions as anger, I would say. Not that all anger is good when it does stuff, but it is emotion that we have natively and is from God, and learning to control it. Those kinds of things. I mean, the barbarians at least acknowledge that it's there and it must be dealt with. We live in a society that says, no man get angry, never, no. And I think that's part of a lot of the angst that's going on. But that takes us into psychology and a bunch of other places. So the Turnip Merchant, the Turnip Magnate, you've been heard on the Academic Agent and the Radical Liberation podcast dealing with both politics and economics. You are a 17-year-old Wunderkind, as we in the LCMS are wont to say. Where can people find you if they want to engage you after this show?
Usually just Discord. I don't have Twitter or Facebook or a channel yet, or anything along those lines.
Very wise man.
I am in your Discord server.
What?
SMChill. So
are you here as an advertisement for the Mad Christian Discord server, Chill?
If we get more people in there, like the ones that are already in there, that seems like an absolute win.
Can we tag you with questions? Can people come in and say, "Hey, at Turnip Magnate, can you answer my super question about way back in history when for?"
I don't know why he would go to me. There are brilliant
Dr.
people
Kuntz
in there.
answers usually as well in the Brief History Power channel, but it sometimes takes him a while. He's a busy man. You maybe would like learning it if you don't know it. So I'm just trying to give people the freedom to reach out to you. You hang out in which channels there? I mean, we've got a number of channels.
Any of them. Just ping me and I will probably answer. But
right on.
I don't know. You might see some of the questions, like very basic or stupid questions I've asked beforehand, and go, I don't know if I want to ask this guy anything.
We all have our blind spots, and that's why the tribe needs to be bound together, right? Even the strongest in the middle has the weakness of not knowing what it's like to be weak, and the whole becomes the body. So speaking of Skype, okay, this is my out, right? Speaking of Skype, it is a terrible resource, and yet it interfaces with the broadcasting software that I have better than anything else that would, let me have this conversation with you. And so what this means is I don't get to say goodbye to you off camera or anything, because the music will be playing and there'll be all this noise and much other stuff that Skype just doesn't know how to deal with and whatever. So I'm gonna say goodbye. Right. Thank you for being on the show. We're going to take about a 3-minute break and come back with everybody's questions that have been lined up, including that one I left you hanging on at the end. Turnip Magnate, thank you so much for being with us on the Saturday Morning Chill.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
All right, he is risen. You are paid for it. That makes you immortal now, and he's not going to be long anyway. This is Saturday morning. Chill. I am your favorite mad Christian. We were talking to Sidewinder before, distracted by turnips. And no, I didn't ask why. We were talking about the Ten Commandments and the observation that different cultures seem to apply the natural law that the Ten Commandments perfectly reveal. Whoa, for your understanding. Various cultures apply that naturally within limitations. That is to say, in some cultures, you apparently have more license. Then again, evil men do evil things in microcosm too. So the talk of whole cultures, this is sort of the modern lie again. Modernism is not all wrong, it's just half wrong because it presupposes it's all that there is. And so it says, oh, we saw this and we observed this and therefore, and it's like, yeah, sometimes, yeah, but not always, because it's more complex than that. And just because a culture of a group of people often is a certain way doesn't mean that everybody in that group is that way. And so who knows what you observed at that Christian college, what kind of cult behavior that was. It is true that normally in small group religious cult behavior, sexuality and sexual control of the weak is something that comes out. You can see this in observing any of the American cults that were spawned in the 1800s and so forth. So and even the present ones. So it is not entirely unheard of, but it certainly is untoward and not a Christian college by any stretch, because the fact that you're committing adultery means you're not a Christian college. I mean, if you're just openly doing it and you all think it's okay, then you don't believe it's evil. You don't believe in sin. You don't really need to be saved. You've been saved unto evil. Now, is it possible that the gospel of Jesus Christ, the truth of the resurrection, the power of baptism, working upon that corporate group over time reforms them, regenerate? Yes, that's how it works, is the God goes in with his word into evil places and he changes them into Christian places. Sometimes those places already thought they were Christian places and they need a reformation, right? To go back to the font, to go back to the beginning and drink from the pure source, that which you know cannot be broken. That would be the wall, the rock that is Jesus Christ himself, his name and his word. Okay, so yeah, no matter how you want to spin it, like a culture you might observing moral law to this or that extent, the fact is that what the scripture says is what is good. So to not commit adultery is to not break the boundary of marriage, right? That sexuality exists for the sake of procreative commitment, not just procreation and not just commitment. Yeah, but procreative commitment, potentialities, and sometimes in the fallen world doesn't all work out the way you want it to. Actually, usually, come on now. But when you line up the apple and the orange, you might get a pear, a banana, and a couple of grapes afterwards. And if you put two apples together, you don't have any of that happen. Respecting that as God's ordination for the sake of the banana and the pickles or whatever metaphor for the children, seeing that the sixth commandment is about the good of the children. Well, this is how you extend beyond the defense of your body in present, do not murder, to the defense of your body in next generation. Right? Do not commit adultery. That idea is just so much larger than any culture's rightness or wrongness about applying it. What must be understood is how we relate to each other. That's why in 1 Corinthians, Paul's like, okay, we can talk about a lot of stuff, but you got to understand that the head of God the head of Christ is God, the head of man is Christ, and the head of woman is man. And you have to understand that, or else you're going to miss everything else that I say, right? And so he seemed to believe there was a Trinitarian reality to the distinction between man and woman, which makes, our version of the end times attack against the duality of man and woman very much a direct attack against the fatherhood of God, which it ought to make all of us wake up and be a little bit concerned about listening to the religious and prophetic and purifying priestly preaching of the nonsense experts who are out there gaslighting the world. You just maybe even turn it off for the afternoon. And if you'd like to turn it off and still feel safe for a couple weeks before you realize you don't even need Mad Mondays anymore, we got this thing called Mad Mondays. And Mad Mondays is a newsletter e-magazine that goes out every Monday with all the stuff you could have missed, you did miss if you checked out, and it'll tell you about it, and it'll put it in a Christian framework so you can realize, oh yeah, I should keep doing more of what I was doing rather than worried about all those stories way over there. Mad Mondays, you can sign up at redfist.com/newsletter. So, Sidewinder, I think I kind of answered your question. I certainly touched on it. I recommend my book, Echo. If you really want to get to substantially, why are the Ten Commandments so valuable? Echo's going to give you the the way to view it that makes them always, always fresh and new with more to say to you, that they never run out of things to say. Ryan says this, by they, I mean the Ten Commandments, the Creed, the Lord's Prayer. Ryan says this, in speaking to family members who have wandered from the faith, I am often confronted with the check of standard objections to the faith and general belief that all good people will be fine. Indeed, all good people will be fine. If only we all were so convinced we were good so that we could stop trying to make everything change to be good instead of staying in the morass of pain and despair that we live. Oh, look, we're not as good as we think we are we now? Yes. Anyway, that's just my Gen X talking, I suppose. Ryan says, I am fairly well equipped to respond on most of these, but I was blindsided this week by a reference to Lilith. Oh, were you now? Sweet Lilith. Great teaching of trickery. Oh, I get it. And you found your own answer. And jeez, what an argument, really. It's just sad. So Lilith, and the claim that some Jewish groups believe she was Adam's first wife before Eve. I love this. Okay, so there are some Jewish groups. I don't even have to know who they are, what kind of Jews they are, Orthodox, heretic, it doesn't matter. Just some Jewish groups. And they believe Adam had another wife named Lilith. And so therefore, you Christians are all wrong about everything. The Bible's wrong. See, I won. I mean, that's the argument. Are you kidding me? Anyway, at the table with people you care about, the emotions might be strong and it might seem like they're really, really saying something here. But all I can tell you is like the moment they say Lilith, they just said fairies, dragons, make-believe land. That's where I argue. I argue from fairies, dragons, make-believe land. Where I want to believe this, and so I do. And I don't want to believe that, and so I don't. Because that's how I handle my trauma. Like seriously, that's the whole world's sinful condition. Right? And forget like actual trauma. I shouldn't speak lightly of it as one who has it. But frankly, sin is a trauma as well. It's all fractal. It's all a reflection. Okay? So the fact that you have to deal with Lilith tells you you're not in a conversation anymore. You're in a hocus pocus game. And you can have the right answer. Be like, oh yeah, I've heard about that one too. That one's funny. Yeah, it's just not waste time on it though. I mean, if I told you the world was flat, would you want to hear me out? Okay, so I don't really feel like hearing you out about Lilith at all because the world's not flat. Let's eat Thanksgiving dinner and like be glad it's sunny today instead of debating Jewish myths because you don't like my religion. I mean, I don't know if I'd try that at my Thanksgiving table. I don't know if I need to. I might. I don't know. But somewhere in your heart, you got to draw a line where like it's just beyond reasonable dispute at this point. And Lilith is the emblem of this, the absolute emblem of this. Goodness gracious. It better be a Marionite, for pity's sakes. Anyway, so let's deal with it like literally. I'll stop scoffing at the scoffers, and I will try to deal with them as if they are civil. So I was even told that Adam rejected her because she would not submit to his domination. So she apparently is beloved by some feminists. Exactly. So the reason they like Lilith is because Lilith is the patron feminists or patroness of the feminists. She's the wife who wouldn't submit to Adam, and therefore she's the real woman that was first made, but just wasn't good enough and it's man's fault after all. And now the world's all broken because of him, and well, we're going to be us anyway. And my name means like night and darkness and stuff, and it's some random word yanked out of Isaiah from somewhere, and we have a whole mythology based upon it, by which we tell you that Eve was not only the one who caused the sin, not really, it was Adam, but it's because Lilith was so good or something. It just ends up being an end around destruction of the whole story, which misses the point that a woman was created very, very good. And it wasn't her lack of submission that was so much the problem. It was Adam's lack of understanding what that stewardship meant and not defending her in her trusting naivety, a great and precious gift to the world for the sake of bearing children, not defending that against an assault that Adam, to be fair, could not foresee. How would he have known fairly, and yet he did, and he says as much, and yet he blames the woman and all this. So, you know, what it is, it's just scoffing. It's like, all right, so Puff the Magic Dragon lived by the sea, and therefore America is going to fall tomorrow. I mean, okay, you live in a fantasy land, a cloud cuckoo land. Have you ever seen that reference? It's not really a joke. That's actually civilization's intellectual discourse at this time. It's going to crash. Yeah. And losing the natural distinction between man and woman as a reality that you observe amongst the sheep. that will cause you to do weird science. Yeah, not the kind that they make fun movies out of, which aren't even that fun if you go back and watch them. They're pretty sick, actually. Anyways, strange science is that one. Anyway, a quick online search. Ryan goes on. Let's get back to Ryan. Revealed some shady background on. Yeah, that's shady. Good. That's funny. Did you do that on purpose? That's good. Tending towards the demonic. Yes, this would be true. Something that we don't believe exists, but they exist, and often they are behind a lot of things. And Lilith is like right up their alley, right? Now I'm wondering how this name even ended up in the mouth of my beloved family member, the internet. So are you aware of Lilith, the argument associated with her, such that you could provide some background to better equip me? Should I run into this one again in a witnessing moment? I mean, really, it's like, right, okay, so if you're ready to argue with the flat earthers, then you can bring Lilith to the table for a real argument in terms of Genesis. It's just not part of the history of Christianity. So you have some other religion that some people who are called Jews by blood have made up or converted to that teaches this from some other source. So I don't know where that came from, but it ain't the Bible. So you go ahead and go find that, and you can believe that is your religion, and that's okay. I'm going to stick with what the Bible says, and it talks about Adam and Eve. That's pretty much what it says. And it's right there. And it's like a child could read it, right? It's like you don't have to be a priestly expert to get that part. And so that's where I would go. I would try to be much kinder. Actually, in my world, I just have to hold my tongue a lot and just let things that I can't handle go. And I think that's good advice in many places too. So it kind of depends on is now the time for this debate about Lilith? And since it's not a debate, generally I would be like, yeah, I've heard of that one. I'm tired tonight. I'm just not up for that one tonight. So I'll find some resources or whatever. Now on this one, there's no resources. It's crack science. Like you find me some resources on why Horus isn't actually in charge of the LCMS. Can you find me some resources on that for me? I really am not sure, and I'd like to prove that Horus, the god of Egypt, is not running the LCMS from the actual IC. Right? But get some resources. There's no resources. It's a junk reality, right? And so Lilith's a junk reality. It's a voodoo Jewish myth at best, maybe from Kabbalists, I don't know. And if so, I'm sure they have some sort of really wicked demonic things connected to it, but it's certainly not from the scriptures. And you just have to shrug it off. It's like, right. So I don't believe that Odysseus actually avoided sirens. Right? I don't believe that. I like the story. I can learn from it, maybe. Right? So I don't believe Lilith showed up anywhere. The story doesn't seem much worth learning from what I've seen. It seems like more of the 90s trying to pretend we're on an upswing rather than an absolute collapse. So Andy says, in a completely different direction, I hope, dear Pastor Fisk, in the 4/17/21 SMChill, right around the 1 hour and 44 minute mark. That's specific. This question was asked in the live chat. How would a Lutheran give their testimony or be a witness compared to how many Christians are taught to? How many Christians are taught to? That's a good question. How would you answer this question? I will try. How should Lutheran testimony be different? Testimony in quotes, if at all, from testimonies that are typically given Baptist-Costal, evangelifish. Those are the mean words. Non-denominational, a mainline, once Bible-believing, quickly losing it Christians, right? Maybe even we should call them the new mainline, because the old mainline is not even Christian anymore, right? We were just talking about that. But the new mainline, evangelicalism, is new mainline again. They sold out a second time, and they've gone the same route as all their forebears. And so will they really reform, or will they just lose it all and try to be radically rejuvenated again? I don't know. But okay, so the idea of testimony or witness is really what you're getting at. And I want to take it out of the baggage terminology again, because what happens is we have these arguments from 300 years ago, using terminology from the Bible and getting something from the Bible that's true about that terminology, and then using it to say it's always got to be just like this the way we do it. And there's sort of a overplay of the hand from time to time. And what happened, again, this is Babel, I think. This is the spirit of destruction upon the men who die. The language destruction grabbed those debates over English, and now there are many words that in various Christian groups are off limits, even though they're biblical words, and different groups have different ones because you've rejected the Bible in order to reject the false teachers of the Bible. And maybe that was right. Maybe they were teaching falsely. But the result has been now we've lost the ability to talk about things like testimony or witness in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, unless you're going to sell yourself as the guy who's going to put on a clinic one afternoon and get everybody else to witness. And God bless you, I guess. But like, when the coin in the coffer clings is what I got on that one. So, what I would like to reframe this question as is, Pastor Fisk, should Christians confess their faith? Pastor Fisk, should Christians be equipped, able, and confident to speak before other Christians about what they believe about Jesus? Yeah, like that's totally missing right now, Lutherans. And it's disturbing, in fact. Like, I don't think we always were missing this, and so we didn't need the testimony time. Like, that's how other groups kept their confession of the faith going forward, and I would agree with all the reasons why we don't do it in the liturgy. But where do we do it? Where do we talk to each other about Jesus? Where do we like the Bible rather than just study it by ourselves in corners and then go to class like people who don't talk to people, right? How much of our culture needs to repent? That's my question. That's brought by your question. Lutherans give their testimony this way right now. They call one guy, maybe three, and they say to him, "You tell all of us what we believe every week." That's how we've done it for a long time. Now, the trick is right now, a lot of guys aren't really preaching the Bible, or they think they are. They're writing little thesis papers for college about the Bible every week and reading them out loud, but that's not preaching. So you have that going on. You have the whole zombie apocalypse. Everyone's watching TV. That's their idol. They don't listen to anything but that, and they don't realize it. That's going on. And then you have a culture of distrust, LCMS, between people and pastor built into our governance systems based upon an initial distrust at the founding event of the LCMS. And no matter how you go around it, I've never seen the congregation that has completely gotten over that and just trusts their pastor and follows him. And so we have all these things that are there to actually stop the pastor from being followed. It's weird. It's weird. It's neurotic. And as a result, the pastor can only be followed when he points to specific books in specific ways and repeats it verbatim. But what we found is that, again, verbatim copying when combating the world of the brainwashing machine just doesn't even come close to fighting. Right. And so we're kind of making kids angry about the religion and then giving them a different one that's a lot more fun all the time. And eventually most of them aren't in church anymore, if you haven't noticed. There are a few that stick around. We can pat ourselves on the back for Sunday school for that, I guess, if you want to. I'd rather repent myself. I'd rather believe that it's time to figure out how Lutherans give a testimony. It's time to figure that out. And I don't mean put it in front of the church during the service and do an altar call. Come on. I mean, we got to figure out how to talk about this stuff to each other. Quick. We got to want to. Right? But I don't know how. Want to. Pray that you might. Ask the Lord to open your lips so that you might declare his praise. It's a psalm verse, by the way. Praying those aren't so bad. So the reason why we don't give testimonies is this. Generally, the way testimonies tend to go is you got to have someone do it. So there's one every week. The person's got to get up there and look like they're really living the victorious Christian life. They're going to tell you about how bad it was before they were a Christian, but now they're a Christian. It's so much better, and they gave life to Jesus. And this is supposed to be the preaching, effectively, to really make everyone believe more in Jesus. Over time, the hypocrisy just begins to be seen. The prevalence of the power of the will in most of these stories, most of the people who speak don't have much knowledge of the actual scripture and will say things that are just wildly untrue. And so we are let's not do that in front as the main thing, right? But does that mean that you should shut your mouth and never talk? Because you might say it wrong and someone might misunderstand and disbelieve the gospel wrongly because your false, almost heterodox doctrine was misunderstood because Babel, right? And that's where we've just been put against the mat on the other side. And again, so I don't even know how to answer the question because the last thing we want to do is institute nonsense testimonies. And the last thing we want to do is try to give more more authority to the carnal human flesh and the carnal will in public. Like that's the last thing we need right now. But we do need Christians who start to talk about what the sermon said with each other. Or if they're not talking about what the sermon said with each other, they need to ask the pastor to talk about something that they can talk about from the Bible. And maybe I should repent of that one too. I don't know. Talk to me. So there, I don't know, Andy. That's a really tough question, and it's loaded with so much baggage. And got half an hour for the rest of this, so I hope that helped a little bit. Yeah. Justin says, on issues, etc., discussing Proverbs, you mentioned your view that Proverbs dealing with corporal punishment were more metaphorical than literal. Kinda. Yes. Let's keep going. You seem to see it as exercising the authority to discipline rather than to discipline with corporal punishment. I see that as the greater thing. I see the authority to discipline and the need to exercise that discipline to the pain of the disciplined is more important than that pain being the physical hit with a switch, right? Like Solomon's just not that narrow ever. He's talking about a bigger principle, a wide reality. So Justin goes on, as a new father who is taking part with Sons of Solomon and interested in being a wise father, I would appreciate being pointed to more materials on the topic if you know of any. That is corporal punishment, right? And Christian rearing. Yeah. I wish I could point you freely to a resource on raising kids. Meredith and I have gone through several that we use, and we rely on like 2/3 of it. And then the rest of it, I wouldn't recommend the book. And so that's the challenge there with this kind of advice. I'd say the Proverbs is going to be all you really need. Like we just talked with Turnip Man about first sources, right? Well, first source Proverbs. Here you got a father who knew how to raise a son. He learned it too late, probably. But here's the book he wrote for Jesus, and now you. Yeah, it's pretty solid there. So it's hard for me to point you to another resource, at least off the top of my head, on that matter. I'd love to write one someday. I don't know. That kind of reality is just too much dreams right now. So Justin goes on and says this, though. I've read those Proverbs, particularly given my preconceptions about the culture at the time, in the sense that Solomon intended to say that physical punishment is the very least one tool for the correction and discipline of the children. So let me put you just in a completely different place. Let's look at this from the perspective of Solomon, having watched the rebellion of Absalom, David's son. David's son, who he loved, who he knew would not be king, who he also knew wanted to kill him, who also slept with his own wives, David's wives, all because he was effectively faithless. Adonijah also tries to seize the throne, but Absalom won't even wait. What was David failing to do when he failed to put his son in jail? He spared the rod. And that's how it went. So the point is, anyone who's in the authority of discipliner, if in your discipline you in fact remove the punishment out of mercy entirely, every time, like there's just never any consequence, well, you're going to have a spoiled tomato. They have to. One of my kids, my daughter, I have several, but she made me so proud. I went into her bedroom one evening to say goodnight, and on the wall there's a little paper she's printed out, and it says, "Oh, look, if it isn't the consequences of my own actions." And I was just so proud of her at that moment, right? Because it's like, oh yes, you got it, kid. That's right. You're going to learn well. So that's the idea behind the rod, is that there are consequences to reality that affect more than just you. They affect the tribe. And that before I'm going to let you ruin the tribe, I'm going to discipline you in some way. And that might mean teaching you to see the lesson by making you go through something you don't like, right? Ideally, this is done in a loving, caring environment, right? The reason Meredith and I have generally refrained from corporal punishment is our early experience with it is it didn't work. It was really bad. It's useless. And so instead, there's better ways to work on community environment building within the people that you love. And the key one will be eye contact, by the way. Making eye contact with your children while they're eating at the table for dinner. And nursing mothers is particularly all the way up to 2-3-year-old. If you got them in a bottle, always hold them. Give them eye contact, right? Why? Because that'll create a lot more community and binding within your family than any attempt to perfectionate it by legal strata, right? by trying to ordain physical realities with punishment. And that's where those Proverbs just don't quite, the Proverbs tell us that if you take the Proverbs strictly as corporal punishment, you never get the real beauty of it. You never get the depth of that reality. Okay, I'm trying to do like two things at once. We're going to go to the screen here because one of you earlier asked a question about a proverb, and I'm going to give you credit where credit is due for doing such a wise and wonderful thing, even though it's going to put us all behind here. My schedule. Let's see here. Where'd you go? It was early. Come back to me. Proverbs 16:17. I don't even know the verse, but I want to get your question. I'm not seeing it though. Oh, there it is. Thank you. All right. So where'd my camera go? No. Come back here, you. Like this? There we go. Eternal 2009, who happens to have an anonymous face. I don't know if you can see that there, but that's really cool that Anonymous watches me and has come on as Eternal 2009 to take a break from tearing the world down and ask a question about the Proverbs. It's awesome. How does Proverbs 16:7 line up with the verses that say, if you do God's will, you would be hated? Proverbs 16:17 says this. Whoa. It says that the highway of the upright is to depart from evil. He who keeps his way preserves his soul. But then Eternal says, Jesus says, right, God's will, if you seek God's kingdom, the world will hate you. But Proverbs 17 says, if you keep God's will, you will have a highway of uprightness and you will preserve your soul. Well, okay. This has to do with what you mean when you say the term worldly or temporal. Understanding that this creation's experience functions according to an algorithm or a law that is virally destroying itself as well. Not from itself, but, this unbeing of evil that's here. And then you have the reality of eternity of the kingdom of Jesus Christ, which has taken this into himself, but is going to discard some of it by the end. And so you really want to judge your worldly, your temporal life in view of the eternal picture, not in view of the temporal experiment of it. Because here it is again, verse 17, the highway of the upright is depart from evil. You leave evil in your life and it gets you killed. Well, the world's going to say, well, see, that didn't work. That didn't give you a good life. But our religion's so radical. It's like, no, that was a good life. You don't even know what a good life is if you don't think that was a good life. Like, you're that off if you don't think dying young and martyrdom's a good life. You're that unaware of what the Bible says. Right? So once you can see the value of the world to come over and against the temporal, decay and rust that's happening here, now a proverb like 17, that the highway of uprightness is to depart from evil. In this present world, where the evil is, I'm in part going to be set apart, right? I'm going to be not normal. I'm going to try to leave it behind. And this will preserve my soul, my faith, what I believe with, my heart, which also includes soul and nephesh in the Old Testament means your whole person, everything that you are, your body too in the day of resurrection. And those verses where Jesus says, yeah, people are going to hate you for this here, and it's not going to make sense because they don't know what they're doing. Well, that just goes with this. Does it mean that's the only way the Christian life ends? Early martyrdom? No, the Lord sends as he will, where he will. And let me propose to you, he doesn't intend to martyr any of us right now. Now, maybe he will, but let me propose to you, he doesn't. He intends instead for us to be fruitful, multiply, build houses, live in them, have marriages, and support ourselves locally as best we can, loving our neighbors as ourselves while we wait for his return. And that there's a good chance he'll bless you where you are in your present condition with that, not with wealth and wildness, but with peaceful, quiet days and just enough to care for those who are around you with real life and love underneath the grace of that altar you go to receive the flesh and blood of the Son of Man that will endure it all, right? And go past all of it so you can let the world fall apart if it has to and know you'll either rebuild tomorrow or tomorrow won't even come here, right? So that would be my answer to that. I think that was all right. It was okay. Let's just head back over to more of your questions from the sending inbox. There's some longer ones later, and I do have to go right at 11 today, so I'm just going to keep moving quickly. I will scroll back down and find that super chat from earlier. Thank you, Joe, for the super chat. He says, thank you for your teachings. Always looking forward to watch the Saturday morning chill. Thanks, Joe, for watching. I really appreciate that as well. It's no good if I just talk to myself in a camera and no one listens to it. Luke says this: how does one deal with a constant anxiety that says you're not really a Christian? You've sinned too much, too many times, etc. Just quit. Everybody else is. I understand. Everyone else is jumping off a bridge. Go join them, right? That little end part's a different question. That's why I tag it. I confess, Luke goes on, I repent, I go to confession, communion, absolution, I try not to sin. These are good things. I actively fight against it. That's a good thing. And feel bad when I do sin. That's a good thing, although probably not bad enough. That's probably just always the case for everybody, no matter what. And you know about it. Good for you. Yet the anxiety remains because it's not a ticket to getting rid of the anxiety, especially if the anxiety is caused by overexposure to electronic inputs. I mean, it's just like, that's just a fact. Okay. It's like a physiological fact of your body, that if you overstimulate with visual inputs that are energetic, spiritual, or electronic video watching, right? You are in a heightened state. You are not resting. You are ready to run away from a tiger. You are not running away from a tiger. You're in a preparatory state for running away from a tiger. And if you just continue to be in that state for the majority of your day every day, then eventually you're going to feel anxious and you don't know why. It's because you're just, I got to run. And actually running would probably feel really good, or something like that. Throwing axes at a piece of wood, I found recently tremendously relieving, right? And I even know I'm practicing to catch geese during the apocalypse, so you can't accuse me of being violent. There you go. So, but the anxiety is not a matter of your trust in Jesus enough, okay? It is, you don't trust in Jesus enough to get rid of anxiety by trying. It doesn't happen that way. Jesus Christ removes anxiety when he wants to. Jesus Christ removes shame when he wants to. He makes the scales fall from your eyes when he wants to. So the first thing to know is that you belong to him, and the voice that says you're not really a Christian because you is the devil's lie. If you're not a Christian, it's because Jesus doesn't have you. Now that can be your fault, but the reason you're a Christian is because he does have you, and that's the antidote to the lie. So forget arguing election dogmatics with me for half a second and apply to yourself the gospel for all people. Anybody who wants to be a Christian is one. Until they say, I can do all this evil and still be a Christian, and the whole group says, no, you can't. And they say, yes, I can. Now we can say you're not one. But until then, if you want to be a Christian, you're trying, you're a Christian, man. And it's not because you're trying. You're trying because you're a Christian. Cart, horse, meet Jesus is deliverance, right? Meet the gospel, meet the king, meet the guy who's actually in charge of it all. And he says there's no such thing as you've sinned too much to be a Christian now. Judgment day, when you're making your case that you should get to go to heaven without Jesus, that's the day he's like, yep, done. Okay. But until that day, Jesus is always like that reality, God who wants to be the ingredient that leavens your life. Even if it's a small seed compared to your life, it will grow to be greater in the resurrection. Like he wants to just be that much right now today, and he is. That's why you're asking. And so at some point, Luke, you got to get inside your own head and say, Luke, you're a liar. Luke, you're lying to yourself about your Christianity. You got to stop that, man. It ain't cool for you to be on the devil's side. You do not have to do that. You don't have to let your psyche attack you like that. It is not a requirement of life. It does take practice and discipline. You have to catch your thoughts as they go. And that means the more the stuff's coming in, you don't have time to catch your thoughts as you go. Might need some mindful time. If you don't want to practice mindfulness, I get it. There's a lot of weird stuff out there, but so just sit and stare at a wall for half an hour. You'll feel less anxious afterwards. You might need to write some stuff down. Looking at that might make you feel anxious again. But so just stare at the wall some more, because most of it's not necessary. Most of it's not necessary. Now, don't get me wrong. Go to your job. Don't quit your job. Do your work when you're on the clock. But when you have some time to rest. Stop downloading more anxiety that you think is entertainment. It's not. I'm probably sinning more than I realize too. Luke, we all are. Well, you're complex. You're like a hypochondriac with your sin, man. Yeah. Original sin is so deep. You have sin you don't know about, and left to your own devices with that sin, you will go to hell, and you can't stop that. But Jesus is here to stop that. So how do you deal with that? You preach the gospel to yourself at some point. Try preaching to someone else. Try talking to someone else about what you believe. Say that I believe Jesus is enough for me, even though I don't feel like he is. Like, say that to someone who you trust. And say, I don't need anything other than you to go amen to this one right here. Can we agree that Jesus is enough for me even when I don't feel it? Just say it out loud and someone else says amen. Look at that. You confessed the faith and you witnessed all together at once. You are probably far more of a Christian than you realize, Luke. And the moment you stop worrying about yourself so much, the grace will just start pouring out of you into other people. I believe it. Steve says this. Hello, Pastor Fisk. I'm 24 and have not yet been baptized. Will God preserve your soul. You will be, right? So I'd really like to, but I'm in the military, not quite sure I'll have a chance soon. Well, frankly, you can check out your chaplain's office, and if they are a Trinitarian, ask them, are you a Trinitarian? Trinitarian. And if they are a Trinitarian and baptize you in the Trinitarian formulation, Father, Son, and Spirit, it counts, man. So like go get baptized. A Roman Catholic, fine. Doesn't mean you have to be a Roman Catholic. Honestly, like end of the world, you're in the military, far away from everywhere. Like if there's a Christian who will baptize you in the Trinitarian formula, that's how it works. That's why Lutherans are who we are. I know all the others are like, nope, it's got to be baptized just this way. And we're like, it saves you. And they're like, no, it doesn't. But you have to do it these ways. It's like, we're like, no, it really saves you because Jesus' words and stuff. So like, go find your chaplain. The problem is there's all sorts of non-Christian chaplains, and there's all sorts of Christian chaplains that are nutso and might not even baptize you. Like, oh, you don't want to be baptized. You just want to get the Spirit to fall on you. Like, don't listen to that guy. He's a doof. Yeah. But feel free to use your chaplaincy to go get baptized. And there's lots of Lutheran chaplains. I believe we oversize our party in that tribal scenario compared to the rest of the country. So you should be able to get it done. But anyway, look into it. Yeah. You say, Steve, I'm worried about the consequences of dying and not having been baptized. Oh, so my joke was mean. No, there are no consequences for that. It's not a law. There are no consequences, Steve, for you dying without having been baptized. However, if you're that worried, find yourself a buddy who's a Christian. Can you find one of those? Doesn't even have to be a pastor. Doesn't have to be a priest. Find yourself a buddy who's a Christian and say, hey, buddy, let's go to the water fountain. You're going to baptize me. He's going to be like, I don't know, dude. And be like, 1 Peter 3:21, Romans 6, dude, throw the water on my head, say the words from Matthew 28. And it counts. So if you're that worried, man, go do that. I'm not kidding. Like you could do the bathroom sink instead of the water fountain. You can get a bottle of water. You can have a service if you talk to your chaplain, right? So talk to your chaplain and get her done. Oh, wait. But Steve, you're already baptized. Here we go. Question goes on. I was baptized as an infant in the Presbyterian Church, but I'm not involved in the Presbyterian Church. There is no Presbyterian Church. There is no Lutheran Church. There is no Roman Catholic Church. There is the one holy Christian, Catholic, and Apostolic Church of Jesus Christ. No Latter-day Saints involved in this whatsoever. There's that una sancta, as everyone used to say. And there is, within this diaspora, a great deal of tribal heterodoxy. Various tribes have put up their own household idols and set up the Asherah poles of this, that, or the other thing. But we're still baptizing in the name of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And where we are, well, we're still the tribes in diaspora. We're still that holy Christian, Catholic, and Apostolic Church, even though the dross is there. I mean, Yahweh, Jesus, was working with that Ark of the Covenant even when Levi's sons were doing what they were doing. And so we really believe, I really believe, biblically believing Christian, cool Lutheran, really believes that if you're baptized in a church that uses, I baptize you in the name of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and doesn't in the next sentence say, but I don't mean it. Anybody who just believes you're being baptized into the biblical baptism, even if they're wrong about what that means, they did it. They did it. Ephesians 4. There is one faith, one Lord, one baptism. One. And it is by water and the word, not either, not or. They go together according to, again, Matthew 28. It shouldn't be that difficult to see this. We all got it, So I'm going to suggest to you, Steve, you're already baptized. So the water bottle comment, that's true for anybody that doesn't have knowledge they were baptized. But knowledge that you're baptized means you were baptized. It really does. Unless you can prove that the particular Presbyterian church you were in did not use a Trinitarian formula a la modern-day Methodism. You've got to question yourself the last 20 years there because they don't always use that formula. So you might have to ask that question, but my guess is probably not the case for you. Yeah. Look into that if you need to. Okay, let's talk with the question. So I've just encouraged you to believe you're already baptized. I just told you can be baptized. But what about the one who says, but he can be saved without baptism? I'm going to say, well, yeah, technically you're right. Steve, you're saved right now. Jesus is your Savior. He saved the entire world. You believe. And then if you're like the eunuch and why should I not be baptized? I just told you, go get baptized. Get her done. Is there a better civil way to do that in times of peace? Yeah, sure there is. But where are you right now? Just assess where you are and then seek Jesus, right? It needs to be said, though, that baptism is the seal externally of what is being poured out internally already via the word. And so it's not as though you aren't already receiving the Spirit who is going to seal your confidence in him with the outward reality of baptism. Now, that is not merely an outward reality, but is a mystery, a sacrament. The word just means a mystery. All we know is Jesus said, like, the way you get in my church, peeps, you get baptized. That's it, you're in. And we're like, it doesn't look like that always works the way it should, Jesus, but we're not going to change it because we think the Bible is what he said we're supposed to do. Yeah. And so all the rest of it changes, what I'm saying, right? All the rest of it is adding to the Bible. And what we're trying to do is just stand here on the Bible and tell you, Steve, you're already baptized. And if you aren't baptized, you can get baptized. And you are saved because you want to be baptized. And just leave it at that, man. That's more than good enough. More than good enough. All right, speaking of good enough, we got a question here. It's a little longer one. We're going to transition into what we might call psychosocial trauma online safety vulnerability group dynamic sharing time. A lot of you have reached out kindly since my just kind of frank and direct public admission of discovering I struggle with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And thank you for all your comments and support. And for the record, because I did mention it and it scared one of my people, I have honestly thought about what does disability look like? What does disability mean? And to come right back at it, my conclusion is I'm not a victim. I mean, I am. I'm the definition of a victim, but I'm not going to live like one. And until I demonstrate to the world in some actual way, besides me saying I have complex PTSD, that I am not qualified to fulfill the duties in which I'm currently walking, I have no reason to believe I shouldn't keep fulfilling them. And it just means I get to have a really, really interesting awakening for the next half of my life. And I'm okay with that, right? I'm ready to embrace that, even though part of me is saying that because I'm on a camera. And there's times where I'm like, there's no hope, there's no going on. Why am I even doing this? But what I know now, again, is how to fight with a better story. I've been saying that for a year now, but I got some toolbox kit stuff from my complex PTSD that I found to be incredibly helpful when you want to fight against a story you didn't even know you were in the middle of, which is what trauma usually ends up being. So this next question is just going to go in that direction, and I will riff and respond as I can. It's 10:52. I'll probably end this faster than I want to. It deserves a lot more time, but I got a Sons of St. Paul men's group event today, and I would like to be there economically. So, but here we go. Pastor Fisk, thank you for taking time to talk about your recent diagnosis. I want to be clear too publicly. I am self-diagnosed. So, but at this point, I don't trust shrinks. I've been to too many. So you'll have to bear with me a little bit. I think I'm on this one. Self-diagnosed. Anyway, thank you for sharing it, as well as taking the time to explain to others that they undoubtedly know someone who has been scarred in the past by events that affect their reactions. Yeah, so that's the key. So trauma is a past event manifesting an emotion in the present that skews your ability to see the present effectively and diminishes your communication abilities. That sounded really like I made sense. Sometimes I say things, I'm like, wow, I learned that recently, and that's good. Yeah, so anyway, catch that if you can. I hope I do. So going on, when I was six, someone my family trusted did something to me that should not have been done to any kid. And the society we have created today, everyone acts like being a victim is a virtue, and we have to claim our victimhood and wear it like a badge of honor. So yeah, like I said a moment ago, there's a part of trauma and acknowledging trauma that you in fact are a victim. It's just something was done to you that you could not stop. That's the definition of victim. And part of, I believe, undoing the power of that trauma in the present is to acknowledge the injustice of the victimization, that what was done to you was unjust. And on Judgment Day, if all were to be held equitable, I mean, it's damnable. Just straight up damnable. Yeah. Now, depending on your own upbringing, your own trauma, your own life, your own Christianity, maybe you don't want to stop there. Yeah. Which is where a lot of the psychology will stop. But once you know that it's damnable, you can actually forgive it. You can't really forgive it till it's damnable. It's the point of forgiveness. And so that's why I say I'm not going to be a victim anymore. Like I was victimized unwittingly, I think, mostly. For me, but that's not my honor, nor is it my shame anymore. It's nothing but a past. It's a past that's not as powerful as my baptism. which has been here all through it and remains here with promises far greater than what I've believed myself to be as a result of these events. Yeah. So I do not recommend wearing victimhood like a badge of honor. I do recommend wearing a crucifix like a badge of honor, where the one who appears to be a victim is in fact the victor. Or when I am weak, then I am strong. And it doesn't mean I get to be strong while I felt weak. No, it means I get to feel strong, right? No. You still feel weak. And that is the strength. Right? So there's something there in our Lord. But victimization, victimhood, the litigiousness of it all, like that is certainly something I want nothing to do with myself. Unless I can sue television companies for television existing. I'd like to do that. I also have realized as a Scot, I think I could sue McDonald's because like they ruined my cultural heritage. I mean, just do the math and follow it. We should band together, and they have a lot of money. And I'm like half kidding, but no, not really. Think about it. Cultural appropriation, and they destroyed Scottish culture with Ronald. That guy's not. It's offensive. I'm not a victim, though, right? And that's your point. I don't want to be defined, you say, by the terrible thing that was done to me. Yeah, right. I want to be defined by my baptism instead. I am not a victim. I was a victim. Yes, good. So your identity is not permanent victim, even though you were victimized. Very good. I would much rather be seen as my kid's dad and my wife's husband, that's the present, or to protect the protector of my family, than as that person whose life was altered by the terrible thing he couldn't protect himself from. That's good. Now, the problem is, I think, and you see this as a perfection quest. It's natural to do this. So attempting to live without the victimization is a perfection quest to be something other than you are, whereas your baptism tells you to be what you are, where you are, and own it, knowing that it's forgiven. So from my end of this trauma and knowing where the rest of this is going, let me just say, you're going to have to let it out, man. You're going to have to talk about it. And eventually, that's got to be with the people you need to trust most in your life, which is the inner circle of your family. Now, if you can't do that right away, then the pastor that is trustworthy is the first place to go. Now, if you don't know if your pastor is trustworthy, that means he's probably not. So you got to find a pastor who's trustworthy to talk about serious vulnerabilities and the need to bring things up that have not been brought up before. And when they get brought up, you might just break down because you've been avoiding breaking down by hiding it. And you were supposed to break down when you were 6. So that's where it's all trapped, is in emotions from when you were 6. All right. What I'm most concerned with is I don't know how to tell my wife that I can't help abruptly pulling away from her sometimes. Yeah. So I'll just put it in my context. I will be happy, and then something, and my wife, who is the most trustworthy human being on the planet, not an ungracious bone in her body, suddenly I have no trust in her and I think she hates me. And now that I know that's what's happening, is really illuminating to like, oh, that's why I feel that way. But it's not that she hates me. It's I actually believe my mother hates me. And this has to do with childhood stuff that for another time. You know, how you wean your children is important. And so the fact is, though, that I flip a switch in a moment and I can't trust the most trustworthy person in my life. What I know now is I got to get my eye contact back with her into trust. Well, here's the thing. Your wife doesn't even know you're in this fight yet. How can you build trust with her? You never will. You're hiding from your wife. This will not go well. Long term will not go well. Been there, done that. Didn't know I was doing it. You seem to know you're doing it. Okay. That's the first step of stopping it. Okay. Now, where's the safe place to have this conversation? Because you're like, wait, if I tell her, it'll all fall apart and it'll all go to bed. Yep. I know how that feels too. And you know, those future predictive destruction moments, the fantasies of your own demise, the complex PTSD answer to that is, do you know you're just lying to yourself when you tell yourself what other people are going to do ahead of them doing it? Do you know that's just you being really arrogant about them? You should give them the credit to have the conversation with them before you have or as you have the conversation with them, rather than beforehand, and let them make mean answers that reflect all the bullying of America on your life, right? So you are going to have to find a way to let your wife know this so that she can know when you're pulling away and why, and see why, and eventually, God willing, she's a Christian, so she should want to figure out how to have a different pattern of behaviors that adopts to those moments to help you get out of it as quickly as you can. Because the more you discipline a pattern of walking out and get other people to hold your hand on the path, the more you can really get control of your emotions. And in fact, feel the pain where it really ought to be, because now they know where it is. This is what this is. It's coming back and it's haunting me right now, and I'm going to weep like a baby because. Now, my experience with my family has been, I got nothing but mercy from my kids, and I still can't believe how much they love me. I didn't know that I didn't believe how much they love me. Now I know I can't believe how much they love me. And the more that I am forthright with them about my version of this, not in full detail of everything, but just the pain that I am struggling with a flashback, that this has to do with a certain type of thing that they actually can see now historically. That has opened up me to seeing their love for me in ways I never saw before. And then the beauty of it is that's exactly what we traumatized people need. So if you have children and a wife who wants to be your wife, because she's a Christian and she knows that's what you do once you get married is you figure it out, well, then you've got the toolkit, and the toolkit is each other with good counsel. And so I had mentioned, again, a faithful pastor. You can also find a good psychologist who will function as an objective arbiter, talking with you and your wife initially and giving you a tool belt for this. They have to be, I would say, someone who knows and is able to diagnose you without trying to import a modernist worldview on you. And so, that's why I don't go to one right now, but that objective third party in setting up the ground rules that can help you at home is really, really valuable. So for our part, we seem to be setting up ground rules really well. I've been to enough psychologists, again, to have had the gambit. And in one sense, I was prepared to deal with this in every way scholastically before it happened. And so I have that I'm thankful for and praying about. I cannot be that for you, but I can begin to push you in the direction of someone who's actually there. And the person who's actually there with eyeball contact that you say, I have pain, and they say, I understand. That's what you need somewhere, somehow. And I'm going to say, if it's not your wife, it's your pastor, right? Or even your kid without any kind of full, they need to be your parent savior, but just say, my child, I'm hurting right now. I love you anyway. Just so they know that the pain on your face ain't about them. Most people think it's all about them just about all the time. He goes on. I've always known some of my reactions were noticeable and explained them away as nervous tics, but I also thought I hid most of them well. I joked about being autistic with my wife. She didn't like it, and rightly so, because I'm not, but I didn't know what else to think. Right. It wasn't Augsburger's. I mean, you know what it was, what is it? I'm a weirdo. Right. But no, that's not it. That's not it. They're not nervous tics. They are salvation narratives that you're running from childhood as emotional trajectories trying to fix a problem that only can be solved by crying about the unjust treatment. And then I would say, again, forgiving the ignorance which caused it. Recently I found out that I don't hide them as well as I thought. No, you don't. None of us do. And that they are wildly misunderstood by some. That will indeed be the case because misunderstanding is everywhere. And if you're in a fight-flight, you're going to send all sorts of signals you don't know you're sending. So I have tried to speak, he goes on, with various people's personal and professional many times in 30 years since it happened, with the bulk of that coming in the last 10 years. This is good prep work, right? You're on a working track, which is good. You need allies, man. You need allies. All I can muster to do is choke the words down and steer away from it, right? And that's the fear of it happening again, right? The reason for this have changed as I've gotten older, but now the thought of looking someone in the eye and telling them something that will without doubt change the way I look at me forever is just too much. But yeah, that's what is the antidote, man. No level of trust has ever been enough to get past that, and I completely understand that. There is an element of self-care that is required in all of this, no matter how much trust you're able to build with another human. You also, at some point, must realize that as a human, if you're not getting eye contact from other humans, you're dying. You're dying inside. So even though eye contact with humans is painful because you always feel this pain you can't bring yourself to talk about, you nonetheless need more of that eye contact. And at some point, you need to be with someone who when you're sad, when they say, what's up? You say, I'm just sad. Just leave me. I'm just sad right now. At least be that safe. You can be that safe with your wife. Honey, I'm just sad right now. I'm just sad right now. I need to go talk to my psychologist again. And she's like, what's it about? Again, you would hate for someone to have it change the way they look at you. I've received nothing but more grace from my family since they changed the way they looked at me. And I'm not going to be a victim about it and use it. Quite the other. I'm just going to receive the love they have to give, and I'm going to be as good as I can right back. And I recognize that as good as I can is good enough. It's good enough because it's all I got, right? It's all you got. And Jesus, of whom deliverance is, but I was talking, kind of worldly stuff at that moment. These types of responses can happen with anyone, but it's far more concerning to me when it affects my family. Yeah, exactly. That's why CPTSD is awful. It's like you can high function everywhere except your family. And even there, it's like normal-ish. Sometimes it's weird. You read the book. It's weird. I'm long past believing that I can somehow change this, but I don't want people who are important to me to get the wrong idea by an abnormal response, which is why you have to have a safe place to work it out, that it's not abnormal. You're trying to unleash something that never got unleashed, and a couple of safe relationships and a little bit of steadfast love from a spouse and some kids will go a long way in just letting you cry it out. But you got to cry it out. I know. It's like, so I don't want to cry it. And you got to wail it out. You got to let it out straight up, got to let it out. From your own experience, how do you begin to talk with your family about these reactions, or don't you at all? Slowly, with pain, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, going from this is the latest thing Father figured out that he thinks is interesting to, oh, this is a big deal, and then from my wife's understanding of that, which she was very ready for, I think, to various kids who were ready at various levels. Prayerfully. I've been praying the Sons of Solomon Psalms for a year. Those Psalms ask for certain things. One of those things is to sit with your family at table and joy. One of the great triggers of my CPTSD is sitting with my family at table. I've been praying for a better way for a year. Directly, not directly, like indirectly. I didn't know. Used to be 2 beers, that'd be enough, right? But I'd stopped that for weight loss reasons, and suddenly it just wasn't as easy as I thought it was, right? So finding the space to be safe for them to know that now. How long it took me to realize that just sitting at the table was more likely to have me suddenly feeling flushed and heated emotions that were actually fear, and I wouldn't know why. But like the conversation would always be crisis, even when it's not really a crisis. That's the kind of mask that would be on. Now that they all know this and they see me, I just say, I'm fine. Just let me be. And my wife puts her hand on my shoulder. I have a kid walk around and give me a hug, and they go on with their conversation. And I run through my 13 checkpoint list, of how to remember I'm not a 2-year-old left in a room, but that I'm an adult male, competent of breathing and not having to escalate a conversation about something meaningless because it seems like fearful, right? How do you bring that forward? 1 sentence at a time and with much prayer, so that these Psalms that I've been praying are the answer and they're not the thing I'm going to stop anytime soon. I say to myself, before I say my Kyrie, I say the Kyrie every day. Kyrie eleison, Christe eleison, Kyrie eleison. Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy, Lord have mercy. I say that in the middle of my creed, following some Greek, which I'll leave for another time. But I also say then, I say, Vihi lehem lemeshal. Vihi lehem lemeshal. I am to them a song. It's quoted in a psalm that Jesus quotes. It sounds like something Job says. The drunkards sing songs about me. Why would I say that every day? Why would I think it's important to say, Vihi lehem lemeshal, I am to them a song? Because in my own head, other people's words mean way too much. Because CPTSD destroyed my ego, not like how I think of myself, but like my ability to think as myself. Instead, I always think of as a you should. It's a very weird thing, and I'm glad to be growing another version. Now that I know. But that you shoulding, that driving, not being able to stop because everything from outside has value no matter what. That instantaneously is one of the biggest things. If you realize it's how you're living, is everyone says something, it's true, at least initially, emotionally for you. Like being able to shut that off as a childish reaction, to call it what it is, it doesn't stop it in the moment. What again, another part of the 13 steps is always tell yourself it will end. Tell yourself this will pass. Say to yourself, I'm in an emotional moment, but it will be over eventually. And that will begin the process, right? So how do you bring this forward? With the prayer of the Psalter underneath you, with the prayers of the Psalter ahead of you, with Jesus, your deliverer, the reason you're even having this question in a Christian context where not only can you find the problem of sin and shame, but can find the solution of the atonement of Jesus and his resurrection. Oh, thanks be to God for that insight in your life that you may now apply by praying for the way to form a vulnerable relationship with your wife, because that is your duty as a husband to desire that above all things, and your children as well. Pray for it. Don't try to make it happen. Stop it. That's the problem with this world. Ask for it. Hallowed be his name. Ask for it. Ask for it. God. Last part of the question is talking about the actual, I'm way over time. Is talking about the actual cause unavoidable? Yes. Is there any concern that people that look to you for strength and protection will feel less protected if they know such a damaging event? Well, I mean, look at me, dude. I'm telling y'all. I'm banking on the fact that I'm wrong about most people. That's what I'm banking on. I'm banking on the fact that most people, even if they don't have CPTSD, are struggling with something a lot like me. And that me being honest about the fact that my life ain't perfect is actually going to make them more willing to hear about what I have to say in general. And what I say about Christ, they're going to see that it's not like, this ain't just like cuz, right? It's not like my meal ticket or nothing. I mean, it is, but it's not. Like I would do it without the meal ticket because it's more valuable than the meal ticket. No, I have seen amongst you in terms of feedback, the trajectory of listener growth, monetary growth in terms of Patreon support, all remains exactly where it was. A couple of people go off, a couple of people go on, and you get $5 more this month than last month. And, all of that seems to be unaffected by this. So if I, with this persona, can come out here and tell you, look, like in an instant, it all just goes to, I just lose my head, actually. I'm not even there. Thank God for my family who loves me, who helps me come back right away, or soon enough. I'm out here saying it, man, because the only way out is to be out. Be vulnerable. Stop pretending to be someone you're not, because you can't keep that up. And it's a form of legalism that will create anxiety in your life as you pretend to be someone you're not. You know you're not. You know you're the one lying about it. You're the one hiding the pain. Yeah? And so love yourself enough, because Christ loves you, to trust that his love for you means you're not supposed to live like that alone. You're not supposed to be alone. Not like that. Now, anyone who's listening out there, don't just go grab the first person at Starbucks and tell them, right? Like, that's not what I meant. But prayerfully ask for that person whom you can trust. I mean, goodness. You ask the Holy Spirit for things the Holy Spirit wants to give. He tends to say yes. It's the prayers for the weird stuff that you want to use for yourself that doesn't really answer with much more than a wait for paradise kind of answer. So, hey, this is the Mad Christian Saturday Morning Chill. And yeah, that was intense. We talk about everything here from the Bible to your questions to my nonsense. And sometimes all of that, it makes Saturday in the wasteland one more day to look forward with hope instead of without it. To know that this is a bunch of muck everybody else is wallowing in around here, but the day is approaching when Jesus Christ, who has risen from the dead, who has purchased you with his blood price, who has guaranteed you his own bodily resurrection in a kingdom to come, who has sealed it with the water of his holy baptism, who has guaranteed to feed you with the flesh and blood of his holy mass, the thing he instituted that we should do to proclaim his death until he comes, all of this shall continue to lift up your head from the shame you've inherited and earned for yourself, to see him as a solution to all our ills, including our need for fellowship and communion. Looking for that life of the world to come all the more as we see the day approaching. Rock on.
Was that worth $1? Click the Patreon link in the show notes to sign up. Pretty please?